Welcome to the Core of Success podcast. Entrepreneurship, success, health, life, big things are in your future. And now, your hosts, Sean and Mike.
Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 19 of the Core of Success podcast. How about that? 19 episodes. Crazy thing, Mike. Yes, it is 19. Mid-December.
Yes.
And in just about 20 days, not only does the year end, but the decade ends.
2020.
Isn't that incredible? Another decade of our lives gone.
That's nuts. You know, when I showing my age a lot here, when I start, one of my first real jobs, I'll say, I was teaching. And I remember it freaked me out a little bit because you know how you have like the varsity jackets and you have your graduation year on there?
Right, which you never had when you were in school.
Right. So at the reform school, they didn't give those out. But I remember a couple of the students I had at the time, it was 1996, and they had the OO on their
right.
I was like, I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Now here we are, just a short time, 2020, man.
My son, who's 17, he'll be 18 soon. He's a senior in high school. And I remember seeing that 20 was the year, 20. I'm like, holy cow, but here it is. But it's interesting that you say that because there aren't many guarantees in life, Mike, in case you haven't figured that out yet. Not many guarantees, but something that is guaranteed is that time will pass. And just like you hit that 00 or this 20 is coming, the other guarantee is that we will age.
Yes. Yeah, hey, man, look. I just, as our listeners may know on the podcast, I just turned the big 50, the big 50 back in November. We share the same birthday, as many of you know. But
I'm not 50.
No. He's getting there. He's close. But yeah, but it's funny. You hit 50, you're like, holy cow, man, I'm part of that. I feel like I'm about like 29 right now, or 28. I act around 14. Right. Oh, that's good. I was going to say about 14.
Right.
So, but yeah, man, it's one of those things that just comes, man, every year. And it's like, man, thank God I feel healthy and have as much energy as I did back then.
Maybe even more, right?
Yeah. Actually, you're right. Yeah,
and it's an interesting topic. And here on the Core of Success podcast, we appreciate everybody who's listening. Thanks for being with us today. And what we try to do is a lot of our talk is about business success, entrepreneurial success. It's really important, but really the Core of Success is about all things success. And one of those things is aging. We are all going to get older at some point. Yeah. So I think the way to do that is to age successfully.
Hell yeah. Age successfully, healthy, the quality of your life, the whole thing, man.
Yeah.
It's look, and that's why we're big proponents, obviously, of exercise, training, working out, no matter how old you are. Like I go as hard now or even harder than I did even when I was like 25 or 30. Sure. So thank God. But yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah. So to that end, I thought what would be interesting for people listening is if we brought in an expert on the topic. So went through my mental Rolodex. I don't have an actual one because I don't know that many people, but I went through my mental Rolodex and I said, who do I know who knows something about aging? And I first name popped right into my head, my good friend, Denise. Now, Denise is a physical therapist. She's a doctor of physical therapy, not just a run-of-the-mill physical therapist.
So we're raising
the bar. We're raising the bar. We've never had a doctor on the show. But she is also a board-certified geriatric clinical specialist, so a lot of her work deals in this area. So I thought she'd be able to provide some great insights to us, which will be very interesting, but most importantly to our listeners on how to age successfully. So Denise, welcome to the Core of Success podcast.
Hi, Sean and Mike. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. Now, where are you today? Because we're not in the same room.
Right. I'm in Redondo Beach, California, and I know you guys are cold on that East Coast, and I'm kind of freezing here in LA, and it's 54 degrees. So
well, that's cool. Yeah. We had snow last night up here. It looks pretty, but it's cold.
Well, I'm glad it's pretty. I'd rather have warm and pretty.
So why don't you tell us who you are and a little bit about your background?
Sure. So as you mentioned, I'm a physical therapist and a geriatric clinical specialist. I'm in my 50s. I'm 54, and I have two sons that are 21 and 24. So I recently was an empty nester when my younger son went off to college, and I decided at that point to go back to school. I had my master's degree in physical therapy, and I'm a goal setter, and I dream big, and I, like you, go for the dream and try to reach my goals. So I went back to school and got my doctorate, and um, I took a test to become the geriatric clinical specialist. But I'm also a fitness instructor, have been since, early college days back in the 80s. And I've consulted on a number of different fitness products and ideas. I've written manuals. So I integrate fitness and wellness and lifestyle and disease process, and now aging into what I do as far as working with really, really healthy people in the gym setting, working with professional athletes and highly successful aging people, to the very old and the people at the end of life. So I see the full gamut of what age looks like, what successful aging looks like, and how we can live our lives to live vibrant and successful and active lives.
Well, that's
Yeah,
beautifully
that's great
said.
work.
And
Yeah.
Mike, needless to say, Denise is qualified.
Yeah, I would say. It's interesting, Denise, that you're here today on the Core of Success podcast. So just having this conversation this past weekend with my in-laws, and thankfully, I mean, they're in great shape, but they were actually talking about, exercise and working out. My father-in-law is pretty active. My mother-in-law is looking to get back into it. And, there's that intimidation factor, right? Of
Right,
going back
absolutely.
to the gym. And although they live in a 55 plus community, they have a nice little center there. It's like, oh, I don't know what to do. And it's great that the work that you're doing, I think, is fantastic. And
Thank you.
it's so needed. And I really love that you're here today, because I want to get into not only on that side, but also in, like you mentioned, on the health club side too. Because
Sure,
a
I'd
lot
love
of
to.
folks, it's a great business opportunity as well as helping folks, for sure.
Right, right. So I love what you're talking about, your father-in-law and mother-in-law, both aging, it sounds like successfully as far as health goes.
That's
And the idea of the intimidation factor of people, it doesn't matter if they're 30, 20, 60, or 80, and looking at how do we expand our lives and make them more vibrant, and what can we do with what's available. And you mentioned that they have a fitness center or a wellness center where they live, but a lot of people don't know the value of it, or people have the mindset of, I wasn't an athlete when I was younger, or I've never worked out, I don't know what to do. And I think spreading the word or the messaging about how to live successfully and how to do it successfully is so important. And I think so many people, as they age, say it's too late. I should have done this earlier. And studies are now showing it is not too late. People in their 80s, studies are showing, can increase their muscle mass and their strength. And so you don't have to have been a person who is active in the gym, or a varsity athlete, or a college athlete. We can start at 50, we can start at 60, we can start at 70, and continue to improve our health and wellness and change our chemical markers in our body, our mindset, the way our brain is aging. So studies are showing not only is it our physical body, but it's our brain, but it's also that nondescript part of our bodies, the spirit side. And I'm not talking religion, but that how we are and how we feel. And it's what we call psychological aging. There's many different types of aging. There's biological, there's cultural aging, and then there's the psychological part. And that's how we feel and how we act and how we behave. And as you guys were mentioning earlier, I thought it was funny, Sean, you said 14, and Mike, you said 17, or whatever you said. And that's your psychological age. It's how we feel. And it's not necessarily how you behave, but in some cases, people still behave like they're in their teens.
Sure.
But it's how we feel. But our bodies quite often have to match how we feel if we want to live that vibrant life. And our bodies are falling apart. It's really, really hard to live that really vibrant life if our bodies can't do what our brains want them to do.
So with so many facets to aging and so much research being done, the population is getting older. So there's more and more resources being, devoted to this concept of successful aging. Why don't people in general want to talk about aging?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's really interesting. One of my catchphrases is I believe people think aging isn't sexy.
Mm.
I think it's not a sexy topic to talk about aging, but this is really interesting. And this is what I found. And if you think about little kids, you say, how old are you? And they say, I'm this many. And they stick their fingers up, with 1, 2, or 3, or they'll say, I'm 3.5, and they're so excited about how old they are. And then you ask somebody who's, anywhere, maybe 40 to 60, and you say,
Right.
how old are you? And they're like, well, I don't talk about my age, or my grandma used to say, I'm 39 until I turned 39. And then, I became older than her at some point. But what's really interesting is that older people, and old is, there are 3 different stages of old by definition, but I'm going to talk about old, which is, over 85. You ask them how they are, and they will often round up. They'll say, I'm 97. And I'll say, well, on your, according to this paperwork I have, you're 96, as of,
Oh,
February. And they're like, well, I'm almost 97. So it's really interesting that older people will talk about aging. And sometimes it's a little disparaging, a little bit sad because they are wistful of their younger life. But they will talk about aging, and aging isn't what it's cracked up to be. And, you really need to take advantage of your age now and travel while you can, and you have the endurance and stamina. And they'll talk about the good parts of aging. I have more wisdom, I have more knowledge, I have more patience, I have more tolerance, about many things. But people in what I call midlife have a really, really hard time with aging. And I think Oprah might have said it best. Oprah did this great interview with a bunch of women who were aging, Jamie Lee Curtis and Alan McGraw, et cetera. And she said that, we live in a culture, a youth obsessed culture. And if you're old, you don't matter.
Mm.
yeah.
And it just
Yeah.
really struck me, that we look at older people and they have gray hair and, hearing aids or a walker or a cane. And, we kind of push them off to the side. And the wisdom and the knowledge and the experience, as well as the baby boomer population, is going to be the biggest demographic by the year 2035.
Wow.
So by the year 2035, there are going to be more people over 65 than under 18. It's the first time in history that this is going to happen. And the most interesting thing is this demographic, even today, people over 55 have the most disposable income.
Yeah.
So if you think about marketing, if you think about, selling products, whether they're beauty products or fitness equipment, if we're talking about your industry,
Yep.
this is where it is. And maybe I'm very biased because it's my focus and my love, but really send that message out there that this is where the focus needs to be. We're going to have the most people over 65, ever in our history. And the other interesting thing is that the number of centenarians, the people over 100, is rapidly growing. And not necessarily saying that this is the demographics that's going to be buying fitness equipment or that's going to be buying beauty products, but there is a push for all of us, you and me included, that we are hoping to live long, vibrant lives, not just be old, but vibrantly old.
So you mentioned that there were 3 phases of aging, right? Or 3 levels, I think you said. So you have,
Yes.
and you said, let me start with really old. But at what point is someone considered aging? Like, what's the first level?
So that's an interesting question, because I think it's all in our mind. Like I say, when did we start aging? And people say, well, I don't know. And I say, we start aging the minute we're born. The very minute we're born, we start aging. But there are 3, by definition, 3 categories of old. And they're young old, and that's from 60 to 74, middle old from 75 to 84, and then old, which is over 85. Now that's just the definition of old. But we start aging, aging is a biological and cognitive process. We aging every day. And, that's by definition what aging is. It's just biological and cognitive changes over time.
Well, so I have great news then, based on this new information, Michael.
I'm not
You are
old yet.
young. Yes,
Yes,
you're not
I'm
there
not
yet. You
the
too,
age
Denise.
yet.
You're only 54,
That's
so you guys
awesome.
are
You
a
have
couple of
some time to
youngsters.
go.
Yeah,
There you go.
it's
Right.
There
very
you go.
exciting.
I think
Well-
it's very interesting. I never realized that, but now as you said it, now you start to think back and reflect on your own experiences. When you do talk to the older folks, they are proud of their age. And hey, look what I can do. I'm 85. Like when we were at the YMCA, what was that? A couple months ago, right? The YMCA on Long Island. We met a woman. She was what, 84?
84 years old. Yeah.
I mean, and she was proud of her age. You know, hey, I'm 84. Look what I can do. She's on her sled belt. I'm like, yeah. But then again, you say, oh, if you know, we don't go there, you don't ask, right? That's just the culture we're in now. But if somebody was maybe 54, they wouldn't say, hey, yeah, I'm 54 and look what I can do.
Right.
Right,
Yeah, I think
exactly.
we hear these terms like over the hill,
Yeah.
or you hear people say growing up, it's all downhill from here.
Yeah.
Right,
I think the seed is planted that aging is something that is going to be a negative thing, so to speak. But then you're right, as they get higher in these levels, probably around that 75 mark or so, they do get proud. Wow, I made it this long. I'm still feeling good.
Feeling great.
Let me show it off. So it's very interesting.
You kind of stand out maybe too, right? Like you're the person now where, hey, I'm 85 years old. I can do a lot more and a lot better than my peers.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm proud of that fact. Now here, but you know, if you look back, because they were working out or doing some form of exercise since they were, 40s and 50s, now most likely. But I love also what you said too, is no matter where you start is the key. And that's kind of what I was saying to my mother-in-law. No matter where you're at, no matter where you start, you're going to receive benefit from
Absolutely.
exercise. So that's the real thing, just to get started and to just do it, right? So,
absolutely. And it's exactly what you're talking. It's about the physical doing, but I also believe very, very strongly it's the mental and the cognitive belief, and as well as all of the other stuff that you guys talk about on this podcast. It's the goal setting and the delivering and showing up every day. And maybe for working out for people, it may not be every day, but it's not saying, and I'm sure you've heard this many times, like, oh, I screwed up my diet, I'm going to start Sunday. And I'm like, what do you mean start Sunday? You're going to start this next minute, you have the ability to make a choice. And
one of our core values here at the company is that we believe in constant improvement, business and personal. And in this topic, it's right. It doesn't matter when you start. It matters that you start, because that's improvement. Yeah. So all of these things, I think, lead into what you would probably call successful aging, right? That you're making some of these decisions, you are starting. So how would you define that? Because these people that are, 80, 85, or I'm so proud to be there, they've obviously aged somewhat successfully. And again, you don't know what's going on, under the curtain, but behind the curtain, I should say. But in some sense, they've aged successfully. They're still here, right? That's a good definition. They're still here and still doing it.
They're there to tell
how
the
would you define that?
So I say, it's the ability to remain active and remain functional into late life. And it's the ability to have both cognitive and functional capacity and an active engagement in life. So it's being able to think well, it's being able to process, but able to move. And, I have patients that are in wheelchairs, but they're still able to move. So it doesn't necessarily mean that we're limited by the ability to stand up and get from point A to B, but it's the ability to engage in life. If you're in a wheelchair or a scooter, still the ability to go to your granddaughter's wedding or your grandchild's soccer game, or go shopping, or go to the theater, or be able to get yourself to the grocery store. And it may not be what activity look like when you're 30, but to be able to travel and to walk your dog and to be able to get out with your girlfriends and go to play bridge and go out with your husband and go, to a sporting event, whatever it is, but to be the ability to remain active.
I love that term you use, active engagement in life. And I think like a lot of things in life, it's how you frame it, right? And if you're framing it actively engaged, I'm not just alive, right? I'm not just living, I should say. I'm actively engaged in my life. And you're right. If I can participate in things, even if that definition of participation changes a little bit, isn't that a key to a successful life? That you're still present, you're still able, mentally, physically, spiritually. I think that's a wonderful term that should be used more, active engagement in your life.
Yeah, I love it.
To
I love
me,
it.
the worst thing's got to be if you want to like attend your granddaughter's soccer game or go to an event and you're not able to because of a health related condition. So you're kind of stuck to the house or just watching TV all, that to me is that's sad, right? So
Yeah.
when you're saying you can engage that and really enjoy your life to the fullest and participate in these activities with your families and friends, man,
that's what it's about at any age. That's it.
I'll give you guys an example of that. I was in last month, or what's this, December? In October, I was in Beijing, China. And I go to China a lot for work, but this is the first time I took some time in Beijing, and I went to see the Great Wall. And if you've never been there, it's one of the 7 wonders, right? It's incredible, but it's intense, right? When you can take like a chairlift up like you would get in a ski resort, but once you're there, there's a lot of climbing, there's a lot of walking to go see various parts of the wall. And if you think about a trip like that, if you're not fortunate enough to be going for business, it's a very big expense for a lot of people. They save and they work, and they ultimately make this trip, right, to see this thing.
Yeah.
And then they get there, and I saw so many people just on the sideline of the wall. They couldn't do the walking. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, wow, these people maybe, saved and worked for all these years to get here, and now they can only see this little part. They're not actively engaged in being able to do the things that they set as goals for themselves. And I'm like, wow, what a sad thing in some sense to have that experience. Yeah, you got to see it, you got to be there, but you didn't experience it to the full. So this active engagement, as you say, I think is a beautiful way to frame, a goal as we age.
Yeah, exactly. And then going back to your point of the people that couldn't walk it, but being, cognitively aware and planning even the step further, how could they have done that? Maybe they could have rented a scooter, or they could have hired a porter to push them on the wheelchair if their wife was, couldn't push them, or their husband couldn't push them. So there are ways to engage in life, even though you're limited, and not giving up, or just getting to the bottom of, the wall and looking up and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do this. And being able to problem solve and figure things out, and not just become complacent and I can't do it.
Because that's when it ends, right?
Yeah.
You probably see that in your work, that when people get to that point, it starts to decline rapidly.
Yeah, and then it leads to depression, which is a whole other area of aging. But going back to exercise and mindset, that, studies have shown that mindset and exercise can help with depression. Sometimes people need medication because it's a, chemical imbalance in their brain, which is, mental disease, which people also don't talk about. And that's a whole other topic. But I think, a good mindset and exercise or living healthy or moving as much as we can help move forward with this active aging.
Yeah, the mental health, I'm glad you brought that up. When I was a senior in high school, my grandfather, who we were really close, my grandmother passed away a couple years prior to, but back then, this was in 1988 or so, and you didn't really talk about, especially with depression and mental health. Thankfully now there's a lot more awareness. But he actually committed suicide through his mental depression. And
I'm sorry.
It's something where it really comes back to me is, wow, if he was maybe engaging, if he was maybe working, exercising, or doing something more than sitting in just watching TV, then maybe he definitely could have lived a heck of a lot longer in life, and I would have had an opportunity to enjoy his company more, for sure. But it comes back to that mental side of that mental health, and being engaged and being present and just feeling really good about where you are is really critical. And I always go back to exercise and movement and just doing something, some activity. Really.
And eating well and getting enough sleep. Yeah.
I think one of the other terms that you speak about, Denise, is you make a distinction between lifespan and health span.
Yeah. Are you familiar?
Using, Mike's example, terrible example there, my terrible story. Sorry to hear about that. but I think, your grandfather, there was something that really went wrong in his health span, right?
Sure.
That
Right,
had an
right.
effect there. But what do you mean by those terms, Denise?
Sure, sure. So lifespan is, what we know. It's the length of life that somebody lives. It's, when somebody dies. So how
A
long somebody
number.
lives. Yes, it's a number. And health span, by definition, and I don't want to quote it exactly, but it's the amount of the age which you are until you experience a major medical setback or diagnosis. And we're talking major. And the 2017 World Health Organization, I think it was 2017, the numbers are the average lifespan is now 79.3 years in the United States, and the average health span is 67 years.
Wow.
So there's a 20% discrepancy or disparity, if you will, between health span and lifespan for the average American. Now, we're not talking about maybe somebody who's healthier than most. We're talking about the average.
Yeah.
So if we look at the average, it's 20% of your lifespan, or the end of your life, that you're not going to be living optimally. And I'm going to tell you a really interesting story. I have a patient who's a dear friend of mine, and his name is Chuck. And he unfortunately was diagnosed with with polio as a young boy. And he's been in crutches, and then now he's in a wheelchair, and he's been in a wheelchair for decades. And he's a PhD physicist. So he's a doctor. He's one of the most exceptional men I've ever met in my life. He's in a wheelchair, and he's frail, but he has a mind like the two of you. And the interesting thing is, when I talk to him about health span and lifespan, he says, my body, unfortunately, my physical body is failing me, but thank goodness I still have my brain. But he said, I want my health span to be 1 week from my lifespan. I want to be as active and able to move. And he moves with his wheelchair.
Yeah.
I want it to be 1 week so I can get everything done, say goodbye, and be done.
Yeah.
And
So
again,
just to stay on that theme for a minute,
Love it.
when you said, so the health span is the age at which you experience a significant medical setback, right?
right,
Like
right.
this gentleman that you spoke of, I agree with him. I would like those two things to be close together too. But just so to give a little clarity to people listening, those examples of that would be a heart attack, stroke, things of that nature.
Cancer, yeah.
Cancer, okay.
Yeah. Diabetes,
Yeah.
pulmonary disease.
And then you're living, according to the statistics, you're living the next 20% of your life recovering, if you will, or dealing with the ramifications of that incident or disease.
Correct. And quite often a disease process spirals into many other disease processes. And then you have this whole list of medical diagnoses now, because they're also interrelated.
Yeah.
So
the research that I've been doing on the aging, I like, it's a very interesting topic to me as well. And in anticipation of this podcast, I was reading a little bit too, where they say that the average lifespan is increasing, right, in the United States.
Right.
it is.
But I did not come across this topic of health span is new to me. I appreciate you teaching us about this. Is that increasing too? Is that happening later in life than it used to? It would seem that would make sense, but is that true?
Well, it's interesting. The statistics for the 2015 were actually, the health span were actually a year older, and then 2 years later they were a year younger.
Oh,
so
wow.
I think it's a sliding scale, and I think it's looking at different demographics and different populations and how people live. And again, this is a gross generalization, but I do believe that people who live a quote unquote healthy life have a longer health span. And
I think it makes sense that the spread could increase because medicine, technology are all improving too. So the recovery from a heart attack or stroke or even cancer treatments are improving. So that's good news.
Right. And also people that live a quote unquote healthy life up until they're into their 60s may not get their first diagnosis, of high blood pressure, for example, until they're well into their 70s.
Let me take it from another angle for a minute, though. Being in the health club side is the epidemic of obesity.
Yes.
And that's when you said the health span possibly decreased. You said it decreased a year. I'm very concerned about that because, you know, having 2 kids in elementary school now, and you see, and some of the kids already are you can see it trending that way. Right.
Yes.
So my concern is that as the obesity epidemic increases, is this health span going to continually stay the same or worse, decrease?
And again, I think it's demographically oriented. If we looked at a certain part of the population, I think it could increase or decrease. And then we look at other parts of the population and it could increase. So I don't know the statistic. I'm not an epidemiologist. I will be happy to look into that, but I don't know that data well enough to be able to quote that here. But I want to get back to what you're talking about, younger population, you know, this generation, my kids included, that grew up with this technology, or they grew up on computers and screens and more screens and more screens, and all we have, and you know, we are all now tied to screens, but they grew up with screens. And there's this whole new movement, this new quote of sitting is the new smoking. And studies are showing that prolonged sitting is associated with diabetes, obesity, depression, you know, and then all of the things that are related to that. And so they're showing cancer and you know, just on, and arthritis and poor circulation. And then also, when we're tied to our screens, we're not actively engaged with other people. And I so believe in the eye-to-eye contact and the physical touch part of life. And maybe you're not touching somebody because that's inappropriate, but being actively engaged with people.
Somebody's trying to touch me, Denise.
Yeah. Well, we were college roommates, so
So that's okay.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know anything about that.
No, but to your point,
No,
that
you
physical, you know, just the fact of engaging with people, you know, there's definite health benefits to that mentally and so forth, because again, it goes back to the engagement that you spoke about. You're engaging with people, but you know, all these topics bring up an interesting debate, if you will. And it's like, okay, we're tied to screens and we're doing all this stuff, but at the end of the day, people still have a choice to make, right?
Yes.
I'm tied to a screen all day long, but I'm at the gym 5 a.m. every morning as well.
Yeah.
So what would you say in your experience there, how much of aging successfully depends on choices versus genetics?
Interesting. So studies have shown that 25% of aging is related to genetics.
Wow.
25%.
That's it.
That's it. With the exception is if you grew up in an environment where there was, you know, too much smoke, or you lived in a city with a lot of population, or if you were physically abused or emotionally abused as a child. So other than that 75% are the choices we make.
That is staggering. Let me pause you for a minute there, Denise. That is staggering, because I guarantee, I love it too, Mike. But I guarantee if we went out in the office, we polled 10 people, I bet you nobody would say that. I bet you most people would say that the other way, right? Or at least a closer range that, wow, my genetics are really determining. I think that's fantastic news that you've just given our listeners.
Yeah.
Only 75% of what happens, again, barring something unforeseen, we have the ability to impact.
Yes.
Awesome. If we take advantage of it.
That's
awesome news. That's great.
So let's go there for a minute, because again, you, Denise, I know you're a lot on the rehabilitative side, but you're also on the preventative side, and you're working with the health clubs and training and so forth. We are obviously as well. So that bodes really well. And we talk to a lot of our customers, you know, who are health clubs, military, so on and so forth. They want to get people into the facilities, whether to, you know, prevent some of the things that come along with aging, or in dealing with these aging populations. As you said, the baby boomer population is growing so fast and rapidly, it's going to surpass the younger generations. So how do we spread that message that you need to come in and start making the right choices today? Then, you know, it's going to have this effect later on. Because here's what I can tell you before I get your answer on that. In my 25 years in this industry, the statistics on the number of people that are actually making healthy choices really hasn't changed a whole heck of a lot. it's within a few percentages of the number of people that are working out or joining health clubs and so forth. So, how do we spread that message, and what do you think that we're missing?
And that's a great question, because I've been in the health club industry since the 80s as well. And I don't know what the answer is for that. I've seen marketing change. I've seen fitness trends change over the years. I've seen sizes of health clubs change. We have the big box, you have the little box, you have the home consumer, you have group fitness, you have personal training. So what works best? And in my thought, it's education. And I don't know how to spread that. Is it, public service announcements? I don't know if it's marketing. I think part of it is marketing, and I'm not a marketing specialist, but I think ads are always for look hot, look sexy, be strong and go hard, work hard. And I think that messaging doesn't work for, I'm not talking just older people, I'm talking about the average population. Those of us who love the health club, that messaging works for me because I love that motivation. But I think if I think about the average person who doesn't, exercise is a bad word to them. Aging and exercise are bad words to many, many people. And so I change, when I talk to people about exercise, I call it movement for life. And I don't use the word exercise, because exercise, to people, they don't like to sweat. They don't like the burn. I love the sweat. I love the burn, but a lot of people don't. So I think we need to change the messaging for movement, and maybe we don't even use the word aging. We talk about being active and active engagement in life. And I think that speaks to people more than people want to look hot. They want to look great. But if they're 40 pounds overweight and never exercise, that seems like an impossibility, and it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah, they're not able to imagine that. That's a great point. I think too, it comes back because the health clubs, again, the customers I talk to is they're struggling because they see an incredible opportunity, but they just haven't been able to capture it. So they're looking at all these different things. Is it about the social aspects? Is it, which we know is very beneficial, right? With the training with your peers. Is it the fun? I think personally, like when I go to the gym and I see some of the older folks there that are retired, and man, I think it's awesome because they're there for like 3 hours.
Right.
They're working out, then they'll take a class, then they'll sit and get a protein shake and
right.
with their buddies. Kind of like what I did when I was in high school. Now I'm like 45 minutes and I'm like, oh man, I got to get in the shower. I got to go to work and blah, blah, blah. Or I got to go home and pick up the kids. So it really provides a great opportunity if you're at that stage in life where you don't have the pressure, the time constraints, I'll say, of small children, of work, where now, you know what, you can really be a little bit more, I'll say, selfish and take that time for yourself. Go there, have a nice time, and spend that time. So for me, I see it as it being fun. But like you said, fun may not work because if they exercise, they equate that with that's not fun, dude.
Right.
See, going to the bar is fun, or just sitting there drinking some beer. But the social aspects, I like what you're saying about the movement for life can work, but we really gotta focus our efforts, I think, collectively on engaging everyone to say, look, man, when you come in, there's going to be somebody that can help you. It's not going to be intimidating. There's going to be other folks that are like you here to maybe show that more in the marketing as well.
Right. And the other thing I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to bring this up, is I've seen this trend in health clubs, and maybe I'm only seeing it locally, but I think this is a national problem, and I call it a problem, is that a lot of health clubs and gyms are focusing toward millennials and to these super hard classes that, and I think is a form of ageism, but that's my bias. But these really hard, and I call them like work so hard you're going to throw up classes, which are really fun, but they're not for everybody. But I think the problem is that we look at prime time, and the classes on the market are sexy and they're hot and they've got these great names and really hard, sexy classes, but they don't have primetime classes for seniors because, again, it's not sexy. And or gyms will say, we have senior hours from 11 to 4, or discounted rates for seniors from 12 to, and then they have classes for seniors, which I think is a terrible name for a class, and they're chair yoga or chair aerobics or simple and easy, or, and people as we age don't want simple and easy. They want to feel like they're getting their hard workout. It might not be as hard as that I'm going to throw up class at, that's on the market, but I think that marketing has to be all inclusive, especially if we're talking about this larger demographic. They may not come at 7 o'clock because they may say in their mind, I don't want to be there with a bunch of 30-year-olds. But for those who want to be there because they're still working, that's the other thing, is that older people are still working. Everybody's not retiring at 55 anymore.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you're saying about, with education. I bet you a lot of health club owners and people marketing to try to get members aren't aware of these 3 levels of what you called old, right?
Yeah.
So you're lumping them all together in this 60 to 74, because you're absolutely right. A guy who's 65 and hears, he is technically a senior citizen, right?
Right.
But
right.
he doesn't want to, or she doesn't want to sit in a chair and do that.
Right.
So
right.
I think there's an opportunity there. And I also think there's a big opportunity in this statistic, which is so powerful to me, that 25% of what happens to you in aging is your genetics. And so you have to start making choices, because because what that does is it brings it back to accountability, right? You figure, well, I'm getting older, so there's no point in starting to work out now because it doesn't matter. My genetics are no good. Well, no, Sally, only 25% of that is really it. Come here and do something. So I think that what you, like with many things, educating people, is very critical.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was at a Planet Fitness, or one of our big customers, and they're trying to do, as they say, in their words, they're re-educating the culture on what they call realistic fitness. Right?
I love that. I love that.
And it's interesting because let me give you a couple statistics of what they found. They said 79% of people think you have to work out 3 times per week or more to get fit. So again, think about this aging population. Yeah, they may have the time, as you said, but that's not what I want to do 3 times a week. I've never done it. I did it when I was in my 20s. I'm not going to do that now. 50% of people think that you have to work out 2 hours a day. Isn't that incredible? Half the population thinks that. So their mission, one of their missions, is to rewrite the rules of fitness. Wow. And I think that it can really re-educate the population and bring some more of these people in, because here's what it can tell you: their messaging of being more inclusive is working.
Right.
The interesting statistic is that they have 2.5 times the number of clubs as the next 5 competitors combined. That's staggering.
That's staggering, yes.
But most importantly, they have 3.5 times the membership of the next top 5 competitors. So what that's telling you is all the stuff that we're talking about of rewriting these rules of fitness, educating people on the fact that your genetics are just a piece, that there are different levels of aging. If you can continue to spread that message, I think we can get more of this aging population into working out, whether it be in a club or whether it be, in your community. There's a lot of that type of fitness going on. And that will help us lead to this successful aging that everybody is after.
I couldn't agree with you more. And what a great message that Planet Fitness is doing. I didn't realize all those statistics, and I love what they're doing.
Yeah, because what you hear, people laugh. Oh, they give pizza. Oh, they give away a Tootsie Roll. But there's a reason for that. It's not just to be contrarian. It's because they know that if they can get someone to come just once a week, that person remains a member of the health club and increases their chances of getting fit by 5 times.
Right.
5 times more, just getting them to come once a week. That's why they give pizza once a week. Even if the person shows up on that day, they're showing up to the club. There's more of a chance that they're going to remain and get fit, which is what we're all after as health professionals.
Right. And I think it's, I think the other piece that we didn't speak about, but the other thing about getting old is people start to feel irrelevant and they feel like they're not seen.
Yeah.
And I think, and it doesn't matter at any age. I think if we look at social media, you look at, the young kids also feel irrelevant and not seen, unless you're, Instagram superstar, you're not seen. And, but again, going towards aging, people really feel irrelevant. displaced by younger folk and people and they're smarter and moving faster. And again, older people feel like they're not important anymore, or seem to be important. And what you're talking about there with the pizza and the Tootsie Roll, but that they matter, and that there's somebody's doing something for them because they're seen. And I think that's so valuable, instead of you're old and you can come between 11 and 4.
Yeah, you're different. I think that's another great education point, is that the aging population has this sense of irrelevance. And I don't think a lot of people think of that, because if you go back to what we do in selling to health clubs, the key word there is club. And club means you belong, right? You're permitted to come here. You're a part of this. We want you here, so on and so forth. But these people are feeling irrelevant. Then they're coming in, they're feeling intimidated. So why would you go back, right? Or why would you go in the first place? But I think these simple education points can really move the needle in getting more people engaged and starting to make the choices that will lead them to successful aging.
Right.
So let me close it on this point. Let me ask you one last question. People listening, right, who are, aging, okay, you're 30s, well, soon you're going to be 40s, you guys are now 50s. There are definitely choices that people can make today that are going to lead to a vibrant life down the road, in terms of what they should start doing and some of the things they should stop doing. So in your experience, give us a couple tips on the choices that we can make, because as you said, it's 75% of the game is these choices.
Right.
So what are they?
So studies, and this is based on numerous research studies, and they're simple. This is not rocket science. This is not going to be earth-shattering, but getting enough sleep.
And how much is enough sleep? What do they say?
7 to 9 hours a day.
Okay.
Now,
7 to 9
if we look at older people, may not get 7 to 9 hours at one shot. They might, nod off during the day and get an hour or two here and a little bit less at night, but that's okay. But it's for healing of our brains. It helps to prevent dementia and depression and Alzheimer's by getting enough sleep, but it also helps with processing, for all of the active stuff we have to do. So that's one. It's eating well. And, eating well, there's so many different diets on the market, et cetera, but eating well, avoiding processed foods and getting enough fiber and protein and nutrients in our diet. Staying hydrated. And then moving throughout the day, whether it's going on a brisk walk throughout the day, that can be it, is going for a brisk walk. But one of the other things that I think is so important is socialization. And that doesn't mean playing bridge with your friends. It means interacting with people and not just sitting behind a screen at home. So getting out and being amongst people. So all of those things I think are so important. And then the things that they're showing to try to avoid is smoking and not too much alcohol.
Yep.
So,
what's funny about your list, and you preface it by saying it's not rocket science, and it really hasn't changed, right? It's common sense. Sleep, there's that debate. Does everybody need it? And the research is definitely pointing more in that camp. So 7 to 9 hours of sleep, eating well, and what we would say common sense eating, right? Eat your vegetables, don't avoid the sugars, so on. It's common sense, right? Hydration, drink water, right? And again, debates there, how much is enough? But drink eight glasses of water, right? And I know there's players that say more or less, but if you did 8, that's pretty good, right? Move, right? Get up, move, do something, and socialize. I think that one is one that sometimes is overlooked, right? And the younger groups are maybe something they're going to struggle with, because it's funny when you meet a lot of older people, they love to just chat and socialize, and there's definite benefit there. And as you said, the things to avoid: smoking, alcohol, and the opposite of all these good things that you mentioned. So I think it's a pretty good formula.
Denise, I want to ask you something real quick before we wrap up. And thanks again so much for being on the Core of Success. Do you see, and being that you are working in the fitness side and also in the medical side too, do you see where the physicians are starting to prescribe exercise a little bit more for folks, as opposed to just giving them pills and things like that? Do you see that a bit more, or you're not seeing it?
I'm not seeing it as much. No, I think there's a talk about it, and I'm in the beach cities in California, and where people generally live a healthier lifestyle, and there's still not doctors writing prescriptions for exercise. And this is a big push in Canada, where doctors are now writing prescriptions for exercise. And I can tell you that here in the United States, just nationally, I think it's a very, very small percentage of physicians who actually talk about exercise and diet with their patients. And the number of physicians who exercise and eat well is not really high. I mean, I can't tell you the number of cardiologists I've seen that smoke.
Yeah.
And physicians that are overweight or who don't exercise. Now, on the flip side, there are many who exercise and eat well, but I'm just saying, lead by example.
Yeah, I think that, the research on that, when I was a graduate student, my master's is in clinical exercise physiology, and we looked at this very topic. So, okay, why aren't there prescriptions for exercise? Yeah. And the overwhelming theme, back in those times, and I don't think it's changed much, is that they just didn't know what to tell people.
Right.
They weren't experts in that area. And that's a shame, right? If you're going to be someone who's a healthcare provider, you should know the basics on preventative work. But that's why, I think, Denise, the work that you do is so important, because there's so many people, even on the rehabilitative side, that aren't versed in this. Yeah. And they think, I'm just going to fix the issue that happened, but now what? So your experience of having both sides of the puzzle, I think, is phenomenal. I think you're phenomenal. The work that you do is just likewise. Fascinating time today. We could go on and on, but we actually, Mike and I, believe it or not, folks, Mike and I actually run a real business here too. Podcast is a passion of ours, so we're going to get back to that. But Denise, thank you so much for being with us today. We'll do it again. Until next time, guys, remember that the core of success is you.
Big things!
Thanks, guys.